A lot of conservatives, the first thing they think of when they see a pride flag or they see like a gay couple holding hands walking down the street and God forbid like the one man gives the other man a peck on the cheek because they're in love, they immediately think of like, how do they have sex? What are they doing in the bedroom? Oh my God, which one's the top? Are they both the top at sometimes and sometimes they're the what do the balls do? I don't get it. Like that's their immediate thought. And it's like, as like a queer myself, I see two dudes walking down the street holding hands and I'm like, wow, very cool. Isn't it neat how gay people are allowed to be in love like straight people are walking down the street holding hands? Very nice. That's my first thought, if I think about them at all. Because there are a whole bunch of heterosexual couples that'll walk down the street past me holding hands and I won't even give them two thoughts. Because like, I'm just going about my day living my life like a normal goddamn person. This guy, however, gets off a train and was probably steaming the entire time he was on the train about the fact that this just happens to have a color scheme that represents marginalized groups in our society. And it's very weird to me. This is a bit of an older tweet, but it's a topic that I haven't really talked about as much recently. I have talked about it in the past, and you can watch that video after this if you want. I believe it's titled, like, Biromantic Asexuals and Matt Walsh, or so I don't even know what the hell it was. It was about Matt Walsh, and he was mad at the idea that asexual people exist for some reason. And I found yet another example of this, and it's not that it's necessarily hard to find those examples. It's just that some of them are funnier than others. So we have, from somebody who might just be engagement baiting, rage baiting, whatever, some dipshit blue check on Twitter wrote, "No joke. This was my train today. Why the fuck is it necessary to turn a train into a symbol that promotes mental illness and advertises how other people have sex with each other?" And it's just the progress flag painted on a train. And it is like, it's funny, like it's symbolic kind of this guy's worldview and the fact that obviously he's probably just disembarked the train, that like the progress flag is like leaving him behind. Like cinema, really. Beautiful. Because it's just keeping going, it's just going onward, and this guy's just sat here like, oh my God, I can't believe that they would put a flag for a group of marginalized identities onto a train. My whole day is ruined. Get some real problems, man. But what I find about this really interesting is the two claims that are made here. Why is it necessary to turn a train, okay, into a symbol that promotes mental illness? So, like, is everything here a mental illness? Like, are you saying homosexuality is a mental illness? Because I know the talking point is that, like, they think that transgender is mental illness or whatever. But, like, are intersex people, is that a mental illness? The fact that they biologically were born with, you know, a varying degree of a variety of markers that makes one intersex, like their chromosomes not really matching up to their biology, or their genitalia not really matching up to their biology. All of this like, found out at birth in terms of, like, more obvious signs, or the chromosome thing like being found out much later on and like the people are completely unaware of it because there really isn't any noticeable trait. It just happens to be the case that their chromosomes are not as, you know, they would be expected. Like are people who have died of AIDS during the AIDS epidemic, which is signified by the black line here, or is that a mental illness, you know, contracting the AIDS virus and then dying because of lack of action on the Reagan administration's part, who was more than happy because at the time it was primarily spreading through the homosexual community to let them die as a method of like a soft cleansing of queer people from the population. Obviously, it didn't work because, you know, it's not just, for one, a queer exclusive illness. Anybody can get AIDS, and then eventually straight people did, right? Like, you don't even need to have sex in order to get it. As far as I'm aware, it is a bloodborne pathogen. So, like, if somebody's blood touches yours in some capacity and they happen to have the virus, you can get infected with it. So, like, it's not even strictly sexually transmitted, so it's not a sexual disease necessarily. It just can be transmitted that way, is my understanding. Like, are the people who have died because of that, signified by the black stripe here, mentally ill? Well, I guess not anymore because they're dead, but are black and brown people just mentally ill? Because black and brown and queer people are represented by this brown line here on the progress flag. Are they? I mean, maybe this guy would consider black and brown people to be mentally ill just by default. Who knows? I wouldn't make that claim. I do find it curious that when people like Helen Joyce, you know, noted friend of J.K. Rowling, do their photo op where they, you know, because they're very big anti-trans dumbasses, they'll cut off the progress flag pieces that aren't just the rainbow, which is to signify like just homosexuality broadly. And they, instead of like just cutting off from here, which would just get rid of the trans flag, which is the part they ostensibly don't like, but they're okay with the gay people, like the cisgender gay people. Instead of starting at the trans colors, they end up actually starting at the AIDS death memorial line and the black and brown line behind it. They end up cutting that off as well. And even if it's not their intention, it's kind of emblematic of the way that, their worldview seems to work. Because I feel like a lot of those people, given like J.K. Rowling's history and her writing, she's got some sussy takes when it comes to race relations, as depicted in her willfully written fictional world, where, Hermione Granger is made fun of for trying to help emancipate slaves in the Harry Potter universe. Some interesting stuff. Some interesting stuff. But anyway, you've already put more thought into this in 45 seconds than he will in his entire life. Yeah, that's probably true. But anyway, I find it really interesting. And it's not necessarily just because it's fun to clown on the guy. It is. But the second claim then is advertises how other people have sex with each other. This is the more interesting one for me. Because how is this an advertisement for how people are having sex, man? Like, I don't get it. Like, you've lost me at this point. You're thinking of some other stuff that I'm not thinking about. Like, this is a flag that represents love, right? And not like making love like the euphemistic sense, but like literally love, romance. That's what it's for. So like, I don't know how like your mind immediately goes to sex when you see a flag like this. It's very strange to me. That's not what immediately goes through my mind. My immediate thought when seeing a pride flag is like, wow, that's a pride flag. Isn't it cool that, gay people can exist in society? Augurs. But for some reason, this guy and a lot of conservatives, not just this guy, the first thing they think of when they see a pride flag or they see like a gay couple walking down the street holding hands like any other normal couple would do, because they are normal people as well. When they see like two men holding hands walking down the street and God forbid like the one man, gives the other man a peck on the cheek because they're in love, they immediately think of like, how do they have sex? What are they doing in the bedroom? Oh my God, which was the top? Are they both the top at sometimes and sometimes they're the what do the balls do? I don't get it. Like that's their immediate thought. And it's like, as like a queer myself, both in terms of gender, but also sexuality, because I'm pansexual or bisexual, if you're a normie, I see like two dudes walking down the street holding hands and I'm like, wow, very cool. Isn't it neat how gay people are allowed to be in love like straight people are walking down the street holding hands? Very nice. That's my first thought, if I think about them at all. Because there are a whole bunch of heterosexual couples that'll walk down the street past me holding hands, and I won't even give them two thoughts. I won't even give them like a blink's worth of cognitive energy, because like I'm just going about my day living my life like a normal goddamn person. This guy, however, gets off a train and was probably steaming the entire time he was on the train about the fact that this just happens to have a color scheme that represents marginalized groups in our society. And it's very weird to me. And I think the crux of this is very simple. To the conservative, there is no such thing as romance. At least that seems to be the way that they operate. There's no such thing as love when it comes to non-familial love. It's all sexualized for some reason. And I say for some reason, but we can get into why I think that is, my speculation for why that is. But like, there is an obvious difference, I think, for most normal people between different kinds of love, right? There's familial love, the love of family. So like, you love your mother, you love your father. Parents love their children. You love your aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, whatever. That's kind of a familial love, and it's platonic in that way, ideally. Maybe in the South, things are a little bit different. Maybe in conservative groups, it's a little different. But I think most normal people are like, yeah, familial love makes sense. And then it's like, oh, well, then there's another kind of love, which is romantic love. And that's usually involving one person and another person, consenting adults, finding each other to, be nice and fun to hang around, perhaps even attractive in terms of their personality and their aesthetics, and being like, wow, I really enjoy my time with this person. I would like to spend more of it with them, potentially even marry them one day, have children one day, that kind of thing. But the first and foremost part of that is the romance. It's, the early stages of the relationship when you've just met each other and you're both like, you see a twinkle in each other's eyes and you're like, yeah, this might be a thing. Who knows? There's like the first couple dates and all this kind of stuff. And all of that is very romantic. You go out, to dinner and a movie, and you go to see the movie first so that you have something to talk about at the movie if things aren't as easy to talk about, generally speaking, though hopefully that's not the case and you have more than just the movie to talk about. But that is a pro tip. And then eventually, that turns into whatever further stage of being in a relationship with somebody romantically. And often it is the case that from there leads to any kind of sexual engagement with that person. And you could even, like, in the beginning phases being like, it would be nice to do that if I could eventually get to that point with this person. If they trust me enough, if they care about me enough to get to that point, I would like to maybe do that. And that could be a thought in your mind when you've just seen the person, right? Like, and you're not even friends yet. And you should keep that shit to yourself. It's normal to, as an adult, find another adult attractive and be like, wow, I'm trying to see what's up there. But, like, you keep that to yourself. And that shouldn't be your main motivator unless both of you are clear that that's the case and you're just fucking around. But, like, what I mean to say is that romance does not necessarily, but often leads to sexual engagements, right? And I think most people understand this. Most people, when they think of a couple, they'll think of a heterosexual couple because that's the majority of the population when it comes to sexual identity. So they'll think about a man and a woman in most instances. And they'll think about, if you gave them, like, to write out a timeline for me of how this relationship might go, they would be like, okay, well, you don't know each other. And then you've met each other. And then you become friends of some capacity. You learn more about each other in a platonic sense. And then you start becoming potentially romantic, going out on dates, learning more about the person more intimately in terms of, like, what they do in their off time, like, their family life, their more private hobbies that they might have, like, oh, maybe they're a painter on the side, but they're working an office job. And they don't really share that with a lot of people because it's kind of something that they're not super confident in, but they're willing to share it with you because they like you as a person. And then eventually, you might end up getting into, like, an actual romantic relationship, and that will then potentially lead to sexual engagements that then might or might not lead to a family starting, children, and yada, yada, yada. Like, that would be the normal timeline of how that would be. And that would make sense. Like, if there was a straight pride flag, not super necessary because straight people are doing okay in our society, but if there was one, I don't think the first thing people would think of if they saw it was, a man and a woman having sex. I think they would think about the romantic couple, right? Like the people holding hands walking down the street that you see in your day-to-day life. Because it's not often you're seeing those people fuck, right? Like, in fact, you should never unless they want you to. And you're okay with that, right? But for some reason, this guy sees a pride flag and immediately thinks about sex. Immediately thinks about sex. Advertises how other people have sex with each other, he says. Like, if this was a straight pride flag, would he have that take? Like, would he be like, oh, this is a flag that represents how people have sex with each other? I don't think so. And it's literally the same for the pride flag, bro. If I see a pride flag, the first thing that should pop into your mind, or that pops into my mind that should pop into your mind, is like, wow, a gay couple. Like a woman and a woman holding hands walking down the street. Potentially, like starting a family or something like that, which, obviously will involve sex in many instances, but doesn't always. Aromantic people exist, asexual people exist. Aromantic, asexual people exist, and they can still become a couple because it's like a spectrum of asexuality and whatnot. It's very complicated because people are not simple creatures. Maybe conservatives are, and they haven't really evolved past, like, the primordial ooze. So I just find that very interesting. And this is, like I say, it's not the first time I've ever seen this, and it's not going to be the last either. If I look at my own YouTube channel and we scroll back far enough, I think I titled it A Romantic Bisexual Disney Drama and Matt Walsh's Brain Dead Takes. I think that's actually it. It's a fair amount of time ago. Oh, and this is another one. Conservatives are weird about romance. So 1 year ago, I was talking about this. It's an evergreen topic because conservatives will never stop being insane and mentally unwell on this specific issue. There it is from 2 years ago. Essentially, Matt Walsh's take was he ended up seeing that one of the people at Disney, I don't even remember what they were. They might have been like an exec. They might not have been. I don't fucking care. Like that Disney exec said that they were biromantic and asexual or aromantic and bisexual. No, biromantic, asexual. And he was like, how could that possibly be the case? How could you be biromantic and asexual? Like, he quite literally said that that was impossible, and his reason being essentially boils down to he doesn't think there is a distinction between romantic love and sex. And in that way, he is sexualizing romance. He is sexualizing love, which is really weird in many ways if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. Because, like, I will give him the benefit of the doubt, though I don't know why I should. I don't know that he is sexualizing familial love. I'm sure, hopefully, he understands the distinction between, platonic familial love and romantic love. Hopefully. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, though. But, like, the idea that he doesn't believe that somebody can be bisexual and aromantic because he specifically doesn't believe that you can be asexual and also doesn't believe that if you were to be asexual, you could be in a romantic relationship with somebody. He's essentially saying he doesn't think you can have romance without sex. He's essentially saying that you cannot be in a relationship with somebody without having sex with them. He is quite literally saying, given his logic tree, that that is impossible. And the response to that is, why are you sexualizing love? Why are you sexualizing romance? I thought the left were the people that were sexualizing all the wholesome good things in our world, in our society. But it turns out the right cannot, segregate, for as much as they like segregating other things, they can't segregate sex from romantic love. If you follow that logic tree, the sexualization of romance, it runs down some really fucking weird paths, man. So when I saw this, I wrote on Twitter, the conservative sexualization of love leads down some really disturbing paths, man. Everyone understands the difference between familial and romantic love, but for some reason, conservatives always conflate love with sex. I imagine because they see it as a means to achieve sex and procreate. Sure, that often follows from romantic love, but not always. Asexual people, etc. And I think that is one of the major reasons. The major driving force for many conservatives to get into a relationship, often conservative men to get into a relationship with a woman, is to procreate. To have sex in order to create a child, to breed. And in that way, it seems like on their hierarchy, the romance is less important, even though it's what comes first and potentially unlocks the door to leading to the sex and eventual, procreation. Which is really weird, man. Like, how horned up do you have to be to think this way? But there is so much of an emphasis from conservatives online, like even the owner of this fucking shithole website that was shit before and is worse now somehow, Elon Musk, talking about birth rates declining or whatever, because he's worried that brown people from the South are gonna end up being in larger numbers than whitey. Like, it is the first thing on conservatives' minds to procreate, and because of that, it's the first thing on conservatives' minds to have sex instead of romantic love, which I don't even know if they think that's real. Because it seems to be the case that they see it as a means to an end. They see relationships as a pathway to marriage, which is a pathway to procreation, so they legitimately do see romance as the prerequisite. Yeah, it's kind of lumped in, and it's not as important because the end result is the goal. And that's really fucking weird. And we'll get into why in a little bit, but I want to, finish up with this part first. I continue. If you see a random couple and immediately imagine them having sex, you're a pervert. Literally. You are perverted. You are horned up. You need to take some alone time at home and work those emotions out, for lack of a better term. You gotta get to work being less horny in public, man. If I think at all about a random couple, it's just, wow, that's nice, people in love, because I'm a normal person. It's the same for pride flags. They represent romantic love first, not sex. And that is a factual statement. They represent romantic love first, because that is what is most present in our society, and it is one of the first steps to achieving sex, should that even be a part of the conversation, is romantic love. I would argue that's the more important part of a relationship than the sex, but call me old-fashioned. Maybe I'm the crazy one here for thinking that romance is more important than sex, and you shouldn't see your partner as just a sex object, unless that's your fetish, which maybe it is for some of these conservatives, and they just don't know how to describe that. Or maybe they think that that's a degenerate thought process, and they hate themselves for it, but they can't stop themselves. Who knows? Who knows? Because if they saw somebody on the left who was very promiscuous and having sex with a lot of people, they'd have some unkind words to say about them. So if that's the way that they think, and I have a lot of evidence to kind of support the idea that that's how a lot of them think, it's just a lot of the men, especially on the conservative movement, they just see women as sexual objects as a means to have children. And you're repressing that, maybe go to therapy, Maybe do some introspection and work on that. And don't turn that shit into your fucking politics, man. It's weird. Don't shove your fucking sexuality into everybody's faces. Even in the basics of how they have a relationship, they see hierarchy. Sex better than marriage, better than romance, better than family, better than friendship, better than whatever else. Yeah, because the end result is to, perpetuate the white race, I guess, which is apparently under threat at all times. It's very weird, dude. The idea that a aromantic person exists to a conservative, I think is easier for them to understand than an asexual person. Because I feel like a lot of conservative dudes are in aromantic relationships without that label. Because the entire reason they got with a woman in this case was because they thought that she was hot and wanted to put a baby in her. How much romance can you possibly derive from that shallow of a relationship? It's going to be pretty difficult. That's why conservative dudes are always bitching about being victims of divorce court, because they didn't get into the relationship with the correct frame of mind and the correct amount of respect for their partner. They just saw them as an incubator machine for the child that they wanted to have for some strange reason. I can't even conceptualize wanting to have a child with a person if I didn't romantically love them, and wanted to spend a lot of time with them. I can't put myself in that mind state. If I'm gonna have a child with somebody, I'm gonna want to spend my life with this person, and I'm gonna want to like them as a human being. I feel like your long-term romantic partner should also be one of your best friends, but maybe I'm not horny enough for the average conservative, and I just can't see their worldview that way. I don't get it. And that's not even to consider the conflation of like romantic love with sex and how that, ends up being applied to younger couples. Because like you'll have a couple in high school, and I mean, ideally, they're not thinking of procreating, right? Ideally, like that couple in high school are just like going to the movies, hanging out, sharing their hobbies, getting food. Like the idea that they should be thinking about procreation, like maybe it's in the back of your mind. Like, oh, in the future, when I'm like 25, maybe if I'm still with this person, we'll start a family, But especially given the socioeconomic conditions for a lot of people, especially in like the younger generations, like that's just not a viable thing. Like to start a family, that's a lot of money, man. Nobody's got the fucking money for that shit. Nobody has the time for that shit because they have to work more hours for less pay because of conservatives voting for Republicans who cut taxes on the wealthy and oppose minimum wage increases, Like the idea of having a family is a very foregone idea for a lot of younger people. But you'll have a lot of parents who will be like, their kid just graduated high school and like, okay, so when am I going to have some grandchildren? Because like my life is devoid of meaning now that you're going to be moving on to college and going to be out of my house. So something's got to make my life have any kind of interesting thing going on. When am I getting grandchildren? Like that's a very common thing for a lot of young people. Even people not in a relationship. It's like, when are you going to produce an offspring with another human being so that I can feel good about having a grandchild? And, like, that's a weird enough on its own. Like, it's fine to be a parent and be like, wow, I would love to have grandchildren one day once my children are all grown up and have their own families, That would be quite cool. I think that's fine. Aspirational even, But, like, to constantly be pestering a young adult who's just graduated high school, when I'm going to have grandkids, when am I going to... This weird as hell, man. And I feel like a lot of the time that's conservative households. And that might be a little bit of projection for how their life went. Thinking back to my conservative high school, a lot had kids by 23, 24, and several had kids before 20. Yeah, and this is, by the way, this is the same side of fence conservatives that opposes comprehensive sex ed in schools, which usually starts around like 5th grade, middle school in the US, which is just meant to teach people like the biology of their body and how baby is formed, and then also what consent is and what abuse looks like and how to report it. And then also, like, how to avoid sexually transmitted infections and how to not accidentally get somebody pregnant and then potentially have to get an abortion or be a teen parent. That, like, comprehensive sex ed in school, studies have shown leads to less teen pregnancy, which leads to less abortions. It leads to less transmission of sexually transmitted infections, STIs. It leads to less abuse between peers. And it also leads to less child abuse because the children, or more reported child abuse, meaning that children that may have been abused in the past but didn't know what it was that was happening to them, once they learn about what abuse is, like what a bad touch is from school, they'll end up being like, oh, my mom, dad, aunt, uncle, whatever actually did some bad stuff to me, and they end up reporting that usually to a teacher or to a guidance counselor in the school, or whoever else, and then those people contact the relevant authorities and then bring that, child abuser to justice. Like, all of those are, I think, good things to reduce STI, to reduce teen pregnancy and abortion, to reduce abuse between peers, between, like, classmates if they happen to be, like, dating or whatever, and to reduce child abuse. I think that's all good, actually. But for some reason, conservatives regularly oppose it. They oppose sex ed, which really gets the noggin jogging as to why that might be. Because then if you think about the idea that they think that sex is the most important thing and that, like, they can't segregate romantic love from sex, it's like, okay, well then, I feel like if the most important thing to you is that, like, why do you also oppose the things that make it safer for people to engage in? Kind of weird, man. And then you get on to, like, the idea of conservatives, like, and it's not just, like, conservatives that do this, but obviously it's the topic of conversation here. The majority of the time, it seems to be people who post on Twitter, like, they brought their fucking infant son or, like, toddler son to Hooters, and they film a video of him looking at, like, the ass or breasts of the Hooters waitress. It's like, for one, that's weird as hell. Why are you bringing your toddler son to Hooters? And for two, why are you filming that for people? Like, what the hell is going on in your mind, man? That's weird as hell. Or they'll have, like, the onesie that says, like, lady killer on it on their infant son. And it's like, what are you talking about, man? Like, maybe it's like, oh, well, when he's older, he's gonna, so many girls are gonna fall in love with him. But, like, if you don't really believe in the separation of romance and sex, you're kind of sexualizing them in that way. And that's fucked up. You shouldn't do it. Like, if you think about these things for more than 2 seconds, you should very quickly realize that that's not something you should be doing to your child. But apparently, this is the side of the fence that wants to protect the children. Or like if they see little Johnny, who's like a toddler, and he's like in kindergarten or whatever, and he's playing blocks with Jessica, and then like the dad goes to little Johnny and is like, oh, is that your girlfriend? He's like, what are you implying there? If like this is the way you think about this shit, man. And you necessarily have to think this way about romance and sex to have takes like this guy has about pride flags in public. Like, if your idea is that the fact that this train has a pride flag on it is that it's advertising how people have sex with each other, rather than advertising the fact that a man and a man can love each other, and so can a woman and whatever else. Like, I don't see how you can think that and also think that there is a difference between romantic love and sex. It's not logical. And, like, far be it for conservatives to be illogical. You know, it's their favorite thing. They love contradicting themselves and being hypocrites. But, like, it's kind of messed up, man. And this is all to say that the contradiction is kind of the point, because it's not going to be the case that literally every single conservative who has a take like this thinks in that way and like has thought about this shit in that way. The logic still leads you there, and you should be wary of it. But the primary use for this is to demonize queer people because they don't think that queer people should exist. That's like the most basic. That's what this rhetorical approach is for. And they don't care if they understand it at all. They don't care about the contradiction. They don't care about the weird way it makes the things that they do and think about when it comes to heterosexuals. They don't care about all that shit because it's water under the bridge because, you know, the ends justify the means. Who cares about the contradictions if at the end of the day, this is enough to put queer people away into the dustbin of history, even though that's literally an impossible task. But that's like the whole point. Because in order to use this kind of rhetoric, in order to demonize queer people and try to subjugate them and potentially remove them from society, you necessarily have to believe that there is not a difference between romantic love and sex, which is obviously not true to most people. But you necessarily need to believe that in order to use this line of thought. Because otherwise, my response is, oh, well, no, it's just about romantic love, actually. And you're like, no, it's not. It's about sex. And then, you know, the logic tree then necessarily follows that you don't think there's a difference between the two. But that's the whole point, is that they don't care if there is, or they are fine with it. And that's worst case scenario. Because then you get takes about how conservatives, the arbitrary nature of the age of consent and all that kind of shit. And like dudes who have an encyclopedic knowledge of these things in their fucking minds, right? Like, it's not good, dude. Leads down some really dark paths. So I thought it was interesting to look at this and talk about it in this way, because it's been a year since it's come up. I just think that sexualizing romantic love is weird as hell, and you probably shouldn't do it for many of the reasons I've already listed, man. I am interested in the comments though. A lot of the comments are people shitting on him for being a fucking weirdo, because he is. Rage bait for engagement, you don't care about this stuff. You just know that bashing LGBT people gives you clicks. It's sad. Really, have you tried having a hobby or vocation? Or is this really what you want to be doing with your life? He responded, yeah, you're right, I don't care. That's why I spent hours and hours learning about its history and the current push of medicalized children so I could write about it. Definitely screams how uncaring I am about the topic. So he's probably got like he has a Substack. He wants people to like give him money to read his drivel. Nobody cares, man. Guy who is very not gay. This rainbow train makes me want to fuck. So true. I don't know, when I find a train that does that, I will ask the operator. This train is just painted with a flag to represent marginalized communities who are attacked by the likes of you. He responds, yeah, you're so fucking marginalized that they paint trains for you and devote an entire month to your sexual identities. You're basically enslaved by society. This dude would have opposed the civil rights movement, by the way, and the liberation of black people not only from slavery, but from segregation and the Jim Crow laws. Because they do the same, they say the same shit about BLM. Oh my god, you're so marginalized that you're allowed to have protests all the time and gather up in mass numbers and burn down cities, and the police let you do it. Even though that's like ahistorical, because the police have always been in opposition of any civil rights movement. And there is a long and storied history of the police opposition to the civil rights movement for the liberation of black and brown people from the oppression that they face. But like, scratch homophobe, transphobe, queerphobe, and a racist bleeds more often than not. Why does it bother you? Because it's fucking stupid. Great argument. Your feelings. Very nice. It doesn't. That's where your mind goes to. Take responsibility for your own thoughts. It by definition does, so I don't know what you're talking about. It by definition doesn't. The pride flag, first and foremost, describes a romantic love, not sex, you know? It's your problem, dude. Poor baby, did the rainbow scare you as a baby? Did it touch you in a bad place? Get over yourself. If you don't like rainbows, then move underground. They say, okay, groomer, the dying last gasp of the conservative who has been thoroughly owned in an argument and has no other retort than to basically accuse the opposition of being a pedophile. Very nice, dude. I wonder about this guy's takes on comprehensive sex ed in school that reduces rates of pedophilia. I wonder if he's in favor of comprehensive sex ed or not. 75% of queer hate tactics are recycled from racial civil rights opposition tactics. Yeah. Even the trans bathroom panic was first done to black women last century. Yup. Conservatives are intersectional in their bigotry. They may have their own pet projects to attack a certain marginalized group, but they're more often than not going to not like any of them, right? They'll usually just be pro-white, pro-heterosexual, pro-male often. This is in Pittsburgh. Oh, the good heavens. Pittsburgh is now burned to the ground, razed by the woke mob. But I'm glad that, I don't want to say that I was the first people to ever think about this and have this kind of response to this, but I have been, on this train of thought for a long time. Train of thought, haha. The idea that, like, they see a flag and immediately imagine gay people having sex. But that's, like, the majority of replies now that I'm seeing to this, and, like, it's getting a lot of engagement from other people, and I'm happy to see that. Because I remember, like, 2 or more years ago, I was talking about how it's fucking weird that conservatives see, like, 2 dudes walking down the street holding hands and immediately imagine them having sex. That's weird. He's in deep, he used that version of the T-slur? Yeah, no, it's not surprising to me. Like, he's probably anti-Semitic as well. Like, it's not an Islamophobe 100%. Like, it's very obvious. Which is to say that, like, because their bigotry is intersectional, and because they want to attack every minority group, and because they want to utilize the precedent of the oppression that is enforced on other marginalized groups onto other ones, like how they recycle, like, anti-black civil rights tactics against now queer people, because black people are in a better spot now, at least on paper, than they were when they were literally slaves or during segregation and Jim Crow. Still a lot more work to be done to fully liberate people, but, like, they will utilize the oppression of every other marginalized group to attack another one. And because of that, in order to fight back against it, the only way you can fight back with a full deck of cards, with all the tools under your belt, without a handicap, you're gonna have your advocacy for liberating people from oppression to be intersectional as well. To fight against the oppression of women broadly, people with the capacity to give birth, to fight against the oppression of black and brown people, indigenous people, to fight back against the oppression of religious minorities like Jewish people, like Muslim people. All of these things are connected, and it's not even to mention, like, poor people, even poor white people. A lot of the anti-poor shit that goes on ends up hurting other people that are not poor. A lot of the anti-homelessness stuff ends up hurting a lot of people that aren't homeless. You know why you can't just go somewhere and sit on a bench and hang out? You know why you have to spend money to be able to hang out anywhere that isn't your house? And even then you have to spend money to have a house. It's because a lot of anti-homelessness measures that were done in order to remove a lot of these places where people would normally congregate for free in the public. It's in order to keep homeless people out of the public eye, instead of, providing homes for them, which is a thing that we can do. It is all important, and it's all connected. And it's the only way you can truly be against oppression. It's the only way you can truly be for the liberation of any marginalized group, is to be for the liberation of all of them. Because otherwise, you're fighting an uphill battle against an enemy that is using tactics that you're not prepared to deal with. Anyway, so yeah, this guy's weird as hell, and there are many like him, and it'd be nice if conservatives stopped sexualizing romantic love, I think.